USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, January 8th, 2024. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th, 2024 at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to reserve your seat today. Well, before we get into some college hockey, Friday afternoon, we got to see the U.S. World Junior team take gold, a 6-2 win over the host team, Sweden, in the gold medal game. This is a team that seemed to get better and better through the tournament and actually got better during the semifinal game, that 3-2 win over Finland, where it was not a good first period for the USA squad.
It's hard being the favorites, and we see it in college hockey all the time. And these guys are college kids, minus a few OHLs, but it's hard being the favorite. Everybody's got a target on your back. Everybody goes and gives you their best game. And like you said, they got better as the tournament went on. They had a tough pre-tournament game against Canada, which was wide open. I watched that one back and forth, went to overtime, and then a tough shootout win against Czechia. And really after that, until they got to the semis, they had it pretty easy against Slovakia and Latvia, and even in the preliminary against Switzerland. But to have a gut check win against Finland, coming back from down 2-0, really gave them a lot of confidence. And I'll tell you, that Sweden game with the fans chanting and with the band and music, and it sounded like a combination of college hockey and a European soccer match. It was a neat atmosphere, all the yellow. They were jumping up and down. Like during the play, it was hard to watch hockey sometimes because you were watching the crowd because they were so into it, and really ended up being a good win. Didn't like how the game ended there with the fight at the end, but obviously frustration and I think we've all seen teams be a part of it. I've had teams be a part of it. When you put so much into it, and you come up on the short end, or you get a little careless, and then you got to defend yourself. So wasn't crazy with the ending, but we've all been there. We've all seen it, and a great weekend, a great week for David Carl and Team USA. I think he was my pick at this time last year to be that coach. So I should get some sort of bonus.
Always looking for a bonus on that contract that you have with us. Listen, this was a great tournament, and I look back at the winning teams in past years, and I feel like the formula to win this tournament is to continually improve. If you start out hot and then kind of tail off at the end of that preliminary round, or maybe squeak by a game in the quarterfinal round, I think that doesn't help you. That semifinal win. I don't want to say that the U.S. took anything off. I think that Finland came out and gave them everything they could handle early. U.S. had to kind of go with that cliche of the bend don't break mentality. Held into that game, got it back to 2-2, and then a late goal to win it. I just feel like, once they had won that game, I had a lot of confidence going into the gold medal game. And even I thought when Sweden pulled it within a goal there, I think they scored with 3 seconds or 5 seconds left in the second period to pull it to 1. I still felt like the U.S. was going to find ways to extend the lead, and they did. And a real impressive victory, David Carl and his staff. And just point this out, David Carl's 34 years old, and he has now coached a team to the NCAA championship, and he has coached a team to the World Junior Championship. There's not a lot more as a coach at the amateur level that you can put on your resume. I think that's really impressive. Don't be surprised if he gets another call from Team USA, either for World Juniors, maybe a World Championship, or even, I don't want to go too far, but maybe even Olympics. That when you're having that type of success at a young age, he's really proving himself as a coach.
I will say this was his first ever coaching job, or you call it opportunity, within USA Hockey. No festivals, no U18s, no Holinka, nothing. His first ever. So he's 1 for 1. I mean, you can only go down from here, but really it's impressive. He put a great staff together, obviously, of all college guys that have been there. Steve Miller's been on every World Junior staff for the last 6 years, and you got Brett Larson and Garrett Reborn and all the support staff from David Lassonde, who was a college hockey coach, and then all the support staff from college hockey. So this was minus a few OHLers. This was a college hockey win.
As the game was wrapping up, color commentator Dave Starman mentioned Jim Johansson. And we look back over the last 15 years, U.S. and Canada both have won 5 World Juniors. That's a testament to USA Hockey, and Johansson was a big part of building that, not just on the World Juniors level, but we look at the national development team, the USA development program. Has all this work really poised the U.S. for continued success?
I think so. And what a great architect the late Jim Johansson was. And you and I had a number of opportunities to have him on our various podcasts, Ed, and what a gentleman he was. He's certainly missed, but you see his fingerprints over everything that this past team just accomplished. As you started to say, the U.S. National Team Development Program was a big part of what he did. I think that is, when you really look at it, the turnaround in USA's performance at the World Juniors over the last 15 years began right around the same time that the NTDP did. You see that the correlation of putting players in year-round situations where they're getting great coaching, great conditioning, great mental work on the game, and now you're seeing victory. And I'm, the one that still is missing, and we know it is still the Olympic medal. We still haven't seen one of those, a gold, since 1980. There's been close calls like Vancouver, obviously, but that's the last kind of thread to kind of complete this quilt, because it has been a great job by everybody at USA Hockey building this program to get these wins.
I saw a tweet, or I guess it's a post now on X, that before National Development Team program, they had 2 bronze medals. And now there was something like 10 to 12 medals since the start of the development program. I mean, they had the pre-development and they just had the 2 medals, and there was just so many of them to count. And also, you obviously talk about Jim Johansson, but don't forget the people that were really. Scott Monahan was at Lake Superior forever. He's still at the development program. He has so much to do with the hiring of coaches and the day-to-day operations with the development program. And then you've got a guy like Jeff Jackson and Jeff and Bob Mancini when he was at Michigan Tech. So there's a lot more people there that could be involved.
Well, let's turn our eyes back towards college hockey. We expect things are going to be pretty quiet atop the USCHO poll. I think we may see Wisconsin move up. We're recording before the poll is released. Wisconsin with their sweep over Notre Dame in the Big Ten. But BC was off. BU had an exhibition in a 1-1 overtime game with Simon Fraser. Quinnipiac, a tie on the road against Northeastern. Now let's talk a little bit about Northeastern. It's been sort of a slow start for the Huskies. Can we expect them to be maybe a bit of a spoiler or sneak up on some people here in the second half of the season?
I think so. There's plenty of spoiler roles to be played out there. And we'll get into conference standings in the second half of the show, but I feel like there are a lot of opportunities for some teams to play spoilers. But we're seeing good teams. They're going to have bumps in the road throughout the season, and that's something you can't ignore. Not everything. It's hard to be perfect. We've had very few college hockey teams be perfect over the years, so those are the types of scenarios where you have to kind of believe that there will be some spoiler roles and some bumps along the road.
Yeah, there's going to be spoilers in every conference. There's going to be teams that you don't expect to win on certain nights, and there's some spoilers that are going to be played through up and down all the conferences, and obviously there's going to be a lot of sneaky teams, and I can't wait for the buy or sell, or throw a hold in there, because Chris Lurch brought it up the other day in his Atlantic hockey column, and I think that you're going to have a lot of sneaky teams in the second half that are right on the cusp of PairWise and that are going to hurt some people's seasons too.
Let's talk about North Dakota. They kind of went into the holiday break limping a little bit in the record, but they got a good sweep over Alaska. This is a time for North Dakota to kind of turn things back around, a team that we've been talking about as being very good and surprisingly cohesive given the number of fresh bodies on that squad.
Yeah, I feel like North Dakota needed that series. And it was good that they were, it was Alaska. And I'm not saying that because Alaska's a walkover. I think it's good because they actually had to beat a team that has proven themselves this year. That's a confidence builder. And, the fact that they were able to pull away both nights, that was what they were having trouble doing, before the break. All three of their losses right before the break were 3-2 overtime losses. So you're in tight games and you couldn't get it done. Now you get into a situation where they were in a couple of tight games against Alaska in both nights. In the third period, they found ways to pull away. And that's really critical.
Yeah. And like you said, don't take in like this Alaska team's a good team. I mean, they've beat some really good teams. They were on the cusp of right on the PairWise bubble until this weekend, and they dropped to 21. But this Alaska team had already went in and given a lot of teams all they can handle. So yes, that was obviously a big weekend for North Dakota. And like you said, they pulled away in the third, and they were close games for a little bit, but that's what North Dakota needed.
I mentioned Wisconsin at the beginning of this segment, sweep over Notre Dame, 2-1, a close, low-scoring game Friday, the kind of game that you expect to see with Notre Dame, a 7-4 high-scoring affair on Saturday. Wisconsin continues to set marks in their schedule that team hasn't seen in decades. I keep seeing our friend Todd Molesky posting and things for the Wisconsin State Journal and Badger Extra. It's like first time since 1990, first time since 1976, that kind of stuff. They've been great, and they've also been seeing just some terrific output from their goaltender, Kyle McClellan.
Yeah, I said it last week about McClellan and transferring from Mercyhurst. But I got a better question for you. What would have been, and I go back to your betting show you guys do, what would have been the odds that Maine and Wisconsin would be taking two of the top three spots of the PairWise in 2024? I mean, that's a big story. That's a big turnaround for both of those programs. Obviously, Mike has only been at Wisconsin for 1 year, but Ben Bard turning that around. And those are big stories right now. And to see Wisconsin continually do it week after week and do it with a smothering style, kind of like sooner, I guess the comparisons against Minnesota State will continue for a while still. But he's doing it. Kyle McClellan's doing what Dryden McKay did.
Well, what's impressive to me, and by the way, you said the odds. Let's see, both teams. I think Ed, we said they were plus 30,000 to win the national championship before the season. So take that right there. It's probably about I don't know 9,000 to 1 that both of them could maybe reach the national championship game. Maybe even more. Maybe 90,000 to 1 should be the real number. Anyways, I just look at this weekend. They played that tight, old Minnesota State style game on Friday, 2-1, but then got into a 7-4 game on Saturday. And just like I was talking about, North Dakota found a way to pull away in that game. That was really impressive to me. I thought to get a 7-4 victory. They haven't had a lot of those games. I'm just looking at their schedule. They've given up 4 goals a couple of times. They did have a win, a 5-4 win against Michigan when they gave up 4. They lost to Michigan State 4-2 when they gave up 4. But they've only given up 4 goals. That's only the third time all season they've allowed 4. And to be 2-1 in those games is pretty good as well. But they're showing that they can win even if they get into that track meet type of style, which I think that is going to happen at times in the Big Ten. You see more track meet hockey in Big Ten than you do in any other conference, and they'll try to smother you, and they might be successful as they were on Friday. But the reality is they show that they can play, either way. That impressed me.
When are we going to stop calling it the Minnesota State and now just say it's
the
Wisconsin?
Mike Hastings? How about the Mike Hastings?
Or Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, and it is right now.
You know what's going to be interesting for me going into this weekend? This is a bye weekend for the Big Ten. So you're going to see a lot of different teams play a lot of different teams. We mentioned it before the air. Stonehill's playing Michigan. It looks like Lindenwood is going to Wisconsin. Robert Morris is going to Minnesota. So you're going to see a lot of different things happen over this next week. And it'll be interesting to see how the Big Ten, with this architecture of their schedule with a bye, not the first weekend and the second weekend, how it plays into leading into the second half of the season.
Ever since you mentioned Maine and Wisconsin and the odds for a national championship, I have been visualizing Maine playing Wisconsin in my head. Can you imagine that as a national championship game with those two teams and the way they've been playing this season?
Sure.
I mean, no, seriously. I mean, that would be phenomenal.
I can imagine it for sure. And what a great game it would be. It's still, there's still something, and I've seen so many teams get to the point where they make the NCAA tournament, probably win their first game, then get to the regional final and lose because you don't have the experience, and nobody on either team. Well, I take it back. Coaching staffs on either team have the experience in that situation, but not a single player has. So sometimes that moment gets pretty big for the players, but you never know. Ben Barr's been there plenty of times, and obviously Mike Hastings got Minnesota State to, within 20 minutes of a national championship a couple of years ago.
Jimmy gave you the same answer I gave our radio guy after we were tied 1-1 with Stonehill on Saturday after we lost, or after we won 8-1, and we were not playing very well. And he goes, "Oh, you got a fast start you were looking for." I mean, we were not very good, and my answer was, "Yep." The one word, just like you just got to, can you envision that? Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes it's nice just to say yup rather than to argue.
Yeah. Sure.
Let's take a look at one other thing in this segment before we take a break. Arizona State, they won their second straight in-season tournament. They beat Harvard 5-2, Omaha 2-1 in overtime. It leaves them 16th in the PairWise still, and of course that overtime factors into that, behind number 15 Michigan and Minnesota at 14th. Meanwhile, Boston University moved up to number 1, only with an exhibition, so no games. The PairWise hurt Maine with a 4-4 tie against Colgate as they dropped down to number 4, I believe, right now. I guess that brings up the question, and there are a number of reasons why. And we were talking about it before we got started, and we could probably have a 4-hour podcast on this with 3 hours of math and put everybody to sleep. But I guess the question is right now, how volatile the PairWise is. And my hunch right now, and from thinking about other parts, other seasons and so forth, is there's a lot more downside possible in the PairWise than there is upside right now. It's hard to move up, and it's very easy to move down.
I don't understand it, quite honestly. And as a coach, we all sit here and we wonder, you look at things, and guys that are on the bubble all the time understand it better than guys who aren't. But I look at Arizona State, and they haven't lost in 10 games. They have 13 of their last 14 games they haven't lost. Their one loss was to Providence, and they just stick at the same spot. They don't move. They might have been 17 a couple weeks ago, but you would think that a team that has lost 3 of 24 games would find a way, when they're continually winning games in overtime, winning games in regulation, tying games, not losing, to climb in past that 16 spot. And I just don't see it. I mean, it's crazy that, and then maybe you guys who have watched it longer than me, and maybe I just don't know enough about it, but gosh, you would think that with that record, 16 wins out of 24 games and only 3 losses, that would be a much higher PairWise. I'll open it up there for discussion. That's how we opened up our pre-call this morning.
Well, I think a lot of it is math that we probably aren't looking at. Ned said we could spend an hour on the math part of it, but the biggest controller in the modern pairwise is still the RPI. And it's easy to have an RPI move down. We just saw Maine's. All they did was get a home tie, so that's 50%, 80% of 50% because you're at home against a Colgate team that right now is 38th in the pairwise. So they slipped down. Their RPI slipped down. Boom, 4 spots down in the pairwise. In 2 of those teams that passed them are in their conference, BC and BU. Let's start there. But then you look at a team like Arizona State. You might not notice it, but they are continually improving in terms of their RPI. But instead of maybe, a thousandth of a point or 100th of a point, they're only moving 10 1,000ths of a point at a time. And that's not, or 1/10,000th of a point, I should say, or 2 10,000ths of a point each win. And a big part of it is the fact that they're playing a lot of their games at home. You're only getting 80% credit for everything you do. So then even look at the championship game against Omaha on Saturday. They got 80% of 67% because it was an overtime win. So you only get 2/3 of a win for that. And then you still only get 80% of that because the game was played at home. If they played that game in Palm Springs or in Las Vegas instead of in Tempe, that's a neutral site game, and then you're getting 100% instead of 80%. So these little math things all affect your RPI, and the RPI really does. I mean, they should really just call it the RPI. They want to factor in, I get it, they want to factor in if you had head-to-head against that team, and that's what really the pairwise is made up of. Common opponents it's such a kind of a BS criteria. It doesn't affect enough teams inside the pairwise. So it really comes down to RPI. RPI is worth more than anything inside the pairwise. And if your RPI isn't moving, and right now it's just hard it's moving. It really is moving for Arizona State. It's just moving slowly up. It's easy to drop down. It's very hard to move up.
But 2 things on that. And first of all, the computer doesn't take into consideration what an awesome Maine Colgate game that was. The crowd was crazy. Overtime was unbelievable. The computer doesn't take that into effect, unfortunately, because that was a great hockey game. We played early. I got a chance to watch the 3rd period in overtime and the shootout. Unbelievable atmosphere. That's my first thing on that. The second thing that really surprised me, and I expected to wake up this morning and see Arizona State at 15, was the fact that they got a win and a tie on the road against Colorado College. And Colorado College goes and beats Minnesota on the road. So I not knowing, and you're both shaking your head and you're both got points coming, but that's what a normal person thinks, that Arizona State beat and tied Colorado College on the road, and now Colorado College beat Minnesota on the road, that Arizona State should have this miraculous jump in their pairwise RPI, whatever you want to call it.
2 parts of that. One, the further on you get in the season, the less each individual game matters because it's a smaller proportion of the total schedule. So when you get to January, a single game or 2 games are not going to move it as much. But when you look at what the RPI is made up of, 25% of it is your record. So that's the thing you can directly control, how your win-loss tie. 21% of it is what your opponent's record is. So only 21% of that is what Colorado College did. So that doesn't help Arizona State much. 54% of it, more than half, is what your opponent's record is. And that's where you get into what the non-conference record is of each of the leagues. And that's why that impacts it so much. So those individual wins can't do that much. The other thing that can give people a big boost, give teams a boost in the RPI, is the quality win bonus. For top teams, you get there's kind of a secret formula that we think we've reversed engineered and matched up the numbers, but you get wins over those top teams. That gives you an extra boost in your RPI. But that's really what it amounts to, plus what Jim said about the home games and so forth. But at this point, one of the things that's not going to help a team like Arizona State is the opponents, because they're going to have all these games against independent teams, and those numbers are not going to be very high. They're right around 350 are the independents in their winning percentage. So all those things are kind of conspiring against it. And, it is what it is. I think that there's room to relook at the numbers. There hasn't been a real revamp and blow up and start from scratch. It seems like over the past few years, when you see a change, it's when there are results that the committee doesn't like or results that could have happened. And there have been, safety valves and other changes over the years to reflect that. But yeah, it's a case of an independent schedule just makes it really hard, and having a lot of home games makes it that much more difficult, even when you get a win.
And a loss against one of those teams will be a lot worse than a win.
Devastating.
And these two games against Cornell are massive games for them because they're within the top 20. But I will say nobody's going to feel sorry, and nobody's going to feel sorry for Arizona State with the 24 plus home games or whatever they have. You talk about committee changes and things like that. That's the reason they started giving road win bonuses and to get people out of their own building. So I don't see that being a criteria. And then obviously Arizona State moving forward won't have this kind of schedule anymore with the NCHC. But no, I think that they're going to have these Cornell games this weekend could be massive if they got to get 2 wins for sure.
We're going to take a quick break and take a gander across the standings in the 6 Division I conferences when we return. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
Welcome back to USCHO Weekend Review. We're going to take a quick look around the conferences and the standings in alphabetical order. Atlantic Hockey, Sacred Heart is in first place. They had a split this weekend at home with Mercyhurst, 28 league points ahead of RIT with 27 points, although RIT has a game in hand. And AIC with a split over the weekend with Holy Cross has played one more game than Sacred Heart. This is going to come down to the wire, and probably those 3 teams are going to battle for the top.
Can I tell you that when I was putting together these show notes, I was actually surprised. I thought that RIT, A, would be in first, and B, would have a bigger lead. So it shows that I guess I've been looking at a lot of non-conference wins for RIT, where I think they finished with a above 500 record out of conference this year, which is a great accomplishment. But I guess I hadn't noticed that, Sacred Heart was right there, nipping at their heels, and as in terms of points, has overtaken them. So this as you said, I think this is going to be a great race in that league as it gets to the finish.
You also got to look at their schedule too, who teams have played, and that's the big thing with an imbalanced schedule or an unbalanced schedule, I should say. Sacred Heart has already played some of the bottom teams, us included. We're playing better now. RIT's got to still play us. AIC still got to play us. Holy Cross has games in hand. So there's a lot left still in the table for people. I mean, quite honestly, it's fairly close in the middle. Like Bentley's 6 points up on or 9 points up on Army at the bottom and 7 points up on Robert Morris. But that's really only 2 wins nowadays. And they can be made up quickly. And I think you're still going to see a 2-horse race, but don't discount AIC to be creeping around the top there too. And Holy Cross has done pretty well lately. They had a really good non-conference series against Merrimack. They won a big game this weekend. I mean, there's still some teams that are still floating around. Don't discount them. And Air Force went to Bentley and got 6 points, but they did it, and they've got some games in hand on people as well. So don't count the middle there with Mercier. They all got games in hand. That's the weird thing when you're playing an unbalanced schedule. The people are all over the map with games played.
In the Big Ten, Wisconsin has 30 points, 5 points up over second place Michigan State, but the Badgers have already played 2 more games than Michigan State. So those are points that mathematically anyway, the Spartans could catch up. Is that becoming a 2-horse race in the Big Ten between Wisconsin and Michigan State?
You look at their winning percentage, it definitely is. I mean, you're talking 8-3-3, both Wisconsin and Michigan State, and then nobody above 500. So is it a 2-team race? Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, if you put a gun to my head and said yes, 2 teams, or is there a team that's going to sleep and come out of there? I would say 2 teams right now, because there's not a lot of games left in that league. I mean, what do they play? They got 6 teams. They play 24. So I guess they're halfway, but still, that's a big discrepancy from 833 to 472.
I think when you're trying to catch one team, you can hope that team falters and everybody can try to catch up to them. When you're trying to catch 2 teams, you're going to hope that both Michigan State and Wisconsin both kind of fall on their face here in the second half to give a team like a Michigan or a Notre Dame or a Minnesota the chance to move up. I don't feel it right now. I feel like one of these 2 teams, either Michigan State or Wisconsin, will come out on top in this conference. I think that Minnesota probably has the horses to get there. They're just not playing well right now. And obviously taking the loss yesterday, they're going to play again today against Colorado College. You had 5 guys back from World Juniors, probably a lot exhausted. So they were in the lineup, but probably not 100% in the lineup. So, maybe Minnesota turns it around. That's the one team I see maybe having the best chance to turn it around in the Big Ten.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope they're still exhausted, and I hope that they don't turn it around until January 14th.
Well, we do wish you good luck on that trip.
You know what? I'm excited. I got a text from Jim Rosevall yesterday. I imagine Tim will be there at the game.
Oh yeah,
chanting against me. I mean, it's one thing to be on the USCHO staff, but I'm sure that there's people going to be rooting against me within our own company.
Yes.
Yeah. And
that was the one-word answer. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know what? You're going to get to play them on an almost normal size sheet this time.
Yes.
New ice at Mariucci. Well, let's look at the CCHA. This looks like it's probably an 8-team race to be a little bit snarky, but everybody's still got a shot. Maybe Ferris State's dug itself a bit of a hole. Michigan Tech is in 3rd place, but has the best winning percentage and 4 games in hand on Bemidji State, which is in 1st place with points at 25. St. Thomas is in the middle, 2 games in hand on Bemidji. This is a league that, without Minnesota State running off with it as they have the last few years, that really feels pretty wide open.
Very wide open. This, as I was looking at the standings last night and trying to make heads or tails to try to explain it, you talked about the imbalanced schedule in Atlantic hockey. This conference is crazy in terms of who's played what and how many teams still have a lot of conference games to play. How many teams have played a lot of their conference games? Obviously, it's Bemidji State's played the most, and and they're sitting there up top. So everybody's trying to catch them. We have the old expression, games in hand are wonderful, but you still have to win them. We'll see who can maybe win some of those games in hand, but this is like taking a snow globe and just shaking it when you're trying to look at the standings. You can't really see much.
I think you'll see more after in 2 weeks, Jimmy. And this week, you got Michigan Tech versus St. Thomas. And then the weekend after that, you got Michigan Tech versus Bemidji. And I think you'll be able to shake out a little bit more and be able to see if a team like Minnesota State or Lake Superior can creep up. Minnesota State still has only played 10 games. So they've got some games. They've got Ferris twice, who's at the bottom end of the standings right now. You when you're Minnesota State, you hope you can get 6 points and you hope everybody else gets 3, and splits all around and you can keep climbing. So there's still a lot to be determined, like you said, a snow globe, but the 2 Michigan Tech series back to back here will be a good indication of where this league's going to, if those 3 teams are still going to stay in the top 3 or not.
When we turn to the ECAC, Quinnipiac with 22 points has all but 2 of the possible points they could have gotten so far in 8 games. But elsewhere, there's a few people nipping at second place. Princeton having a good season, although they've played a game more than Quinnipiac. And Clarkson has 3 games in hand. Both they and St. Lawrence have only played 6 games. Clarkson not too far behind. Only 3 teams in ECAC right now with records of 500 or above 500 rather in conference. And some disparity there, anywhere from 6 games to 9 games played. Kind of feels like Quinnipiac has already sewn things up, but this also feels wide open after first place.
Wide open after first place for sure, but you can almost give Quinnipiac the trophy already. I just don't feel like they're going to falter. They'd have to lose probably 3 or 4 games down the stretch to give away first place. I mean, that's how much of a lead that they're near perfect in conference. When you really think about it, you said they've left 2 points on the table. Most teams in the country do that in a given weekend. So they are kind of running away with it, but you're going to have great races in that league. For 4th and 5th, and then for 8th and 9th, whether it's going to be a first round bye, home ice in the first round, or going on the road in the first round. That's all kind of right there on the table for many of those teams. You can falter pretty quickly and go from 2nd down to 7th, 8th, probably in the course of a weekend or 2.
I think you laid that pretty good right on the money there, Jimmy. But the one team I will tell you that could be sneaky, and don't forget about them moving up somewhere, is Dartmouth. They've only played 7 games. Their winning percentage is .476, but their record is .500. They're an astounding 4-4-6, 6 ties overall. So that could be a team that you could see climb a little bit, especially the fact that they haven't played a lot of games within league. They've got a couple behind. They've got a few in hand on Yale. They've got a few in hand on Princeton, Quinnipiac. So don't count out the Dartmouth Big Green there.
Hockey East, my goodness. This is probably the league to watch if you want to see a horse race this season. BU with 23 points, BC with 19, and Maine 16. They're really kind of separating themselves from the pack. Maine's got a game in hand on BC and BU, and right up behind UNH, 2 games in hand with 13 points can get them right back in the mix too. And some great matchups coming in coming weekends. I mean, is this the league that's going to go right down to the final Saturday of play?
Yes. There's those one-word answers again. Yes. I can't see anybody just pulling away in it. The interesting part about Hockey East, especially when you have BC and BU at the top, are the Beanpot weekends, because those are the weeks that most teams are playing 2 games, or a number of teams play 2 games, and BC and BU only play 1. So in those weekends, before the 2 Beanpot Mondays, the first 2 Mondays in February, those 2 prior weekends, they usually teams usually start making up their games in hand. So that's when you'll probably see a little bit more level games played. And then of course you in an 11-team league, you usually end up with a team that ends up with the final weekend of the season off. So it gets a little crazy toward the end of the season, but I don't expect anything. I'd see BC, BU, and Maine as the 3 best teams in this league right now. I think that those teams will make a race right to the end. Maybe Providence gets to jump in there. Maybe UNH gets to jump in there. The other thing to watch, though, in Hockey East is the fact that the bottom teams from the first half are starting to play better hockey. Vermont is one team that kind of stands out. Merrimack, I still think they have plenty of firepower. You saw Northeastern this week against Quinnipiac, a 3-3 tie. Even UMass Lowell exploded for 7 on Saturday. Suddenly, maybe their scoring comes in. These are all teams that historically have been pretty good in the last few years. So if these teams get going, watch out for some spoilers, as we were talking about in the first half, Ed.
I don't know. Like, he took every one of my points. I'm sitting here. Okay,
Sorry,
check
buddy.
that one off. Check that one off. Check that one off. So, in the word, since we're going one word answers today, and that's kind of the theme, agreed.
Well, let's finally look at the NCHC. Unlike every other conference, a balanced schedule so far. Everybody's played 8 league games. St. Cloud State 7-0-1 with 22 points. 4 points behind is North Dakota, and then another 4 points to Western Michigan. And then rounding up the top half of the standings right now, Denver a point behind Western Michigan. But what do we see with that? I mean, I think there's a possibility of a resurgent Colorado College and maybe Minnesota Duluth getting a little more healthy.
I was really surprised when I got the show notes and then the look at the standings that St. Cloud hasn't lost a game yet in the NCHC. Because all we talk about, we talked about North Dakota earlier. We talked about Denver, and, they've kind of, I hate to say this, they've kind of went under the radar a little bit. And they're a team that is 6-3-1 overall. I'm sorry, that's at home, 11-5-2 overall. But it's nobody wants to talk about them right now. So it was kind of surprising to me when you send out the show notes about that. So who's the team to catch them? They're all kind of North Dakota, Western Michigan, Denver. There's an upper half and a bottom half right now. The top 4 are above 500. The bottom 4 are below 500. I think a lot will depend on schedules, who's still got to play who and where. But there aren't any easy games in that league. Even Miami's taken some. So I guess my word on was keeping them with the one word, surprised at the NCHC.
I guess St. Cloud is the thing that surprises me too, Derek. They're 7-0-1 in the league. I had no idea about how strong they were in the league I think it's because they've had some bumps outside. You're 7-0-1 in the league, but you're 4-5-1 outside of the league. So that under 500 record in non-conference play is probably what sticks in our heads a little bit more. But they're in good position. I think it's it's one of those situations where I think maybe that league title becomes a 2-horse race. But you mentioned it, Ed. Do you watch Colorado College sneak up, maybe get that last home ice spot? I think that 4th, 5th race is probably as good as any league title race. I think that is always what the NCHC comes down to. Sometimes they get their league champ crown 2 weeks early. But that last night is, usually 3 or 4 teams vying for home ice in that first round.
One other thing to add with St. Cloud, they're sitting fairly well right now at number 12 in the PairWise as we record. They'd probably be in the top 5 if it wasn't for that out-of-conference schedule. And playing in the NCHC, they have an opportunity to move up because of the strength of that league.
Certainly, you keep putting these league wins together. 12 will quickly become 10, will quickly become 8.
I'm going to throw one thing there since you brought that together. The bubble of the PairWise has some powers in it, and Minnesota 14, Michigan, Arizona State, Colorado College, Penn State. Those are teams that you said could put some quality wins together. Be interesting to watch that group of right there, how they're going to move in the second half here.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap things up. I guess the one word for this is done. This podcast has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.